and welcome to this Digital India Dialogue. Today we are talking about e-services for citizens, one of the backbones of the Digital India campaign launched by the Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And today we are joined by a power-packed panel. Joining me is Mr. P. Balaji, Director Regulatory Affairs, External Affairs and CSR, Vodafone, Mr. Jaijit Bhattacharya, Partner KPMG. On my left is Mr. Sanjeev Gupta, MD Health and Public Services, Government Relations and Corporate Affairs, Accenture, and Mr. Serene, founder and CEO of Ozone Networks. Joining us from Bangalore is Mr. Arvind Gupta, of course, National Head IT Cell of BJP. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me on this panel. Mr. Gupta, let me first hand over this panel to you. Your opening remarks really. E-delivery of services, how much is really possible? Digital India, is it a campaign that you think your Prime Minister has oversold to this country?
Well, I actually think this is a campaign which is very much in the making. It's already happening, and a lot of infrastructure content planning has gone into it before it's even been launched on the July 1st. India is and the world actually is seeing the fruits of the digital revolution, and India has about 250-300 million digital and internet users. Billions still need to be connected. So this is the government's role in this project is to ensure the infrastructure, the connectivity reaches every Indian. The digital literacy is very prevalent, and also that the device is easily accessible at a very affordable cost. So the content, the services, and the policies around it is what we are making. But really, the entrepreneur will take over in providing the right content, the right applications and services in local languages. And I think this is a very doable program. It's not something which is not doable, and it's right on target right now.
Right. Mr. Bhattacharya, do you agree with him that this is very doable, this can actually be done? Or do you think at some level it is realistically achieve 44 essential services to be done through electronically deliver these services in a short period of time?
So out of the 44, 15 are already online. 4 more has just been launched. Each one of them is challenging. It's not easy. Even developed countries have found it extremely challenging to bring services online. Having said that, this is a journey. It's a well-started journey, and what's important is to have the focus. And I think what has changed in the last 1 year is the focus has moved from just a government-enabled strategy to bringing in all the stakeholders in the society together. And unless you got the payment gateways online, you got the infrastructure in place, you got the connectivity in place, you cannot really deliver the services that we're talking about. So the journey that we're looking at is where it's a larger enablement of the society in which the delivery of government services will happen. And surely it's happening, and it will happen.
What do you think are the biggest challenges?
I appreciate the real effort the government is taking on.
You appreciate the intent?
I appreciate the intent.
Right.
And I also appreciate the steps that they have taken so far. But my question here is that the transformational jobs that requires in the areas of education, in the areas of healthcare, judiciary, they require solid efforts and time and investments to make it happen in reality. Now, I see, for example, if you take a Department of Post, the postal transformation happened just not like a click. It was actually planned properly, and now you can see some good colors coming into play. Efforts for education and healthcare needs to begin now. In order to see down the line, 2 or 3 years down the line, when you see the northeastern regions, the regions in Jammu and Kashmir, and my pet example, the regions in Budelkhand and the southern part are all leveraging that stuff, right? Last but not least from here part is that how you create that citizens' demand visible. It's coming up and saying, hey guys, this is what I want. My rural friends, my urban friends, my semi-rural urban friends, they're coming and saying, my demand is very different.
Right.
And are you able to give me that satisfaction to my services? That's another element that needs to be plugged in. All those 19 services, the rest to come in.
Right. Mr. Serene, besides education, what do you think is the other big challenge that we need to address at the central government level, at the state government level? But what do you think are the key challenges besides education that needs to be addressed?
I guess, talking from personal experience, rolling out one of the largest Wi-Fi networks in the country. Connectivity is my biggest issue.
Right.
And I think, I won't dilute the word education. We have a very large percentage of the population that don't know how to connect to the internet. So one of the things we are aspiring to do is build in that, that demand of entertainment, of taking an average citizen like my driver to connect to an SSID on Wi-Fi and then go and download a movie. That's his first step to actually connecting to the internet. Then the second thing is going on to government applications and services and experimenting with that, which requires a whole, vast educational service that needs to be done. And that's one of the things, we are involved in, the Delhi government smart city discussions.
Right.
And that was one of my biggest messages to the panel there is we'll get the connectivity in place.
Right.
But what are you going to do after that? So I think education is really the big thing to be looked at.
Balaji, I'm sure you have some thoughts on connectivity.
From a connectivity point of view, prior to just addressing that one issue, I would say the fact that the government is actually talking about making sure that it's inclusive, that they're looking at I would say telecom, IT and ICT as a whole as a means to bring smart governance is a very welcome step. And I believe the moment that intention is set aside very clearly, whether it's through the BharatNet project, whether it's in terms of coming up with guidelines on towers which are very progressive and so on, then all of these things are also steps in the right direction. Then you have to just allow for a little bit of time, a little bit of innovation, and also in a broader context, just for some pilots that can then be scaled up. So I can say for ourselves as a company, we're right now impacting the lives of about 1.4 million people through CSR activities in the space of education, health, and women empowerment. And it's only possible because we are humble enough to say that we know what scale is, but frankly, we cannot do the last mile unless we get the social sector with us, unless we get the state and the central governments aligned to what we want to do. And more importantly, indulge in capacity building at the grassroots level. So I think it's a great objective. Steps have been taken in the right direction. We'll start to see results of it in coming months and years.
Okay. We take a very short break. On the other side, we will talk about what is the role that private sector will play in actually achieving e-Kranti. Welcome back to Digital India series. We are talking about how crucial is the role that private sector will play in ensuring e-delivery of services to citizens. Mr. Gupta, how crucial do you think is the role that private sector will play in partnering with government on this?
I think the examples of using the technology and innovation which comes across is very innovative in kind. So today, we looking into from technology to impact the malnutrition in the country. How? Right. This thought process comes from the private country industries, where they think about it, the R&D put into place, and then come into the technology domain. The second is the scale that we need to think about. Right. So if you're talking about of a country which is of 35 different states and very complex regions geographically as well as language and many other folds, how you address the scale of a particular issue, industry needs to come on the board to make it scalable. The third but not the least is how you define the business model wherein the people are looking into getting the services right, on time, and also affordable. Right? So you need to derive certain new business models to plug in with that level of energy. I think that also comes into place, and with this the business model comes as your investments. Right? So if you find that investment is required for scaling it up, where you find the financial resources. So I could definitely see a very important role, when the industries, play in this journey.
Mr. Arvind Gupta, I would like to ask as to how crucial will be the role of private sector. How will the government really go ahead and attract private sector investments, given that at this stage there is a certain hesitation of technology companies, either in terms of contracts being rewritten or in terms of previous payments not being made? How do you think will the government go ahead and attract top dollar in achieving this project?
Well, this is the interesting part. This is one area where the best of the companies from across the world have already shown commitment, and not only shown commitment, they're walking the talk. We've seen a lot of companies in the space of the last couple of months. Digital India was formally launched on July 1. We have seen announcements from many companies to build their data centers in India, to build their mobile manufacturing facilities in India, to start talking about development of cyber security software and solutions out of India. I think this sector is, as everybody has already commented, something which is across all ideologies, all political spectrums, is very inclusive. So it is attracting all sorts of companies to actually come and really invest in India and look at the big digital base of the new digital natives that's going to be creative out of India. The success of this program also lies with something what Jaijit said, is that we've now had 180 million, 18 crore new bank accounts added. And this number is only going to increase. These 180 million bank accounts were added only in last 1 year. So we are getting people into the payment system, in the banking system, tied to a Aadhaar identity system through a mobile phone. So it's a very, very heartening sign, and I think it's on the right track.
Right. Okay, so how significant do you think will be the role of private sector? What do you think was the ballpark number that you think private sector ought to invest to really scale up this e-Kranti?
And that's a challenging question of what the ballpark figure should be. Let's look at what's needed. In terms of delivering services to the citizens, you would need obviously the policies and the processes which is owned by the government.
Right.
And the government is in the business of governance only. The rest of it, which is the networks that are needed, the hardware that is needed, the access devices that are needed, the ability to create the solutions, the applications, and then to manage them. All of that has to come from the private sector. Now, some of them may be paid directly by the government, and some of them may be hired by the government.
Right.
As an example, the government will not be necessarily rolling out all the networks. People have already rolled out the networks, and that's the industry which has rolled out the networks, and they'll be hired by the government. But the government will also need, as you were mentioning, people to come in and work, right? And by definition, the government will not have the kind of people that are needed because it's a different kind of industry. And that is where, again, the industry has to pitch in and bring the right set of programmers, right set of program managers, right set of investors, PE, funding, financial modeling. So the new innovation models, the technology models, that's what the industry needs to bring in. Based on these technology models, you would also need to have business models coming up, which is how will the government interact? Will there be an SPP? Will there be a PPP? Or will citizens and private sector be involved? And so on and so forth. Once you've got the business models in place, you also have to figure out what are the operational models to be put into place, which will be very, very new because it's a new thing that we're walking into. How will the Gram Panchayat operate without having the right capability in place? Who brings in the capability? What will be the role of the Gram Panchayat? How do we fund that? Will it be funded by taxes, or will we be able to monetize the land that is there in the grams, and so on and so forth? These are a whole bunch of of questions that needs to be answered, and will typically be answered and solved by the industry and the private sector.
Right. Mr. Serene, how crucial will be the role that technology will play, and where do you see, or how significant do you see the role of cloud computing in this endeavor?
I think technology for this entire initiative is the foundation of it. You know, private sector has to be there because that's where, fundamentally from my perspective, the innovation happens. That's when the ecosystem of partners come together.
Right.
Yeah, because one of the bigger things, if this model is going to sustain for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, monetization has to be a key factor in the entire thing.
Yeah.
People have to, from the private sector, be able to make money out of it.
Of course.
To fuel the entire technology evolution. Because technology evolution, especially in the Wi-Fi space, is happening at such a pace. Today we're with the N standard. It has 300 lanes to the highway. Tomorrow we'll be with the AC standard, 1,000 lanes to the highway. And you've got to keep the evolution going and the investment going. So the question in all of this, if the private sector is not there, cloud is not there, where all the files and everything are stored and people can access their files from anywhere, how is this model going to sustain? We can't just build it for tomorrow and stop.
Balaji, if we were to talk about, we talked about connectivity, we talked about technology, how significant will be the importance of data security, privacy? These are issues that still need to be understood. India is still at a very nascent stage if we were to compare ourselves globally. But even now you have PILs that are being launched even on UID and Aadhaar, which are at a very, which sort of show that India needs to understand data security and data privacy that needs to be answered. How do you marry that with the broader objective of e-delivery of services?
So I think just a couple of things which are important. The conversation on investments was an important one. If I just look at connectivity, about $150 billion has been already spent by the operators collectively in the last 20 years. To connect another billion people on the on broadband, you need about $100 billion more. I think the industry is obviously very excited about making that investments. The government is obviously alive to the and very alive that needs to be done. And I think an alignment overall between this, the local level and the central government policies, which is being attempted now, is the step in the right direction. Hopefully that goes up further. On the context of what you talked about, data security and data privacy, the fact that you've got the investment coming into data centers in India, for example, from a lot of companies, gives a sense of, how do I say, a greater control of data staying within the shores, for example. And I think between the government and the technology providers and the operators, I already see dialogue taking place and an awareness about the aspects that need to be looked into in order to make sure that it stays watertight, so that you can balance the overall objectives without making undue compromise on one or the other.
We take a very short break. On the other side, we discuss the rural market and the huge opportunity that awaits India. Welcome back to Digital India Dialogue. We're talking about e-delivery of services and also how the government will really go ahead and reach out to the rural market, which is where, of course, the bulk of the citizens continue to be. Mr. Bhattacharya, how do you think the rural market will really be tapped by the government? That's largely untapped right now, either in terms of vernacular software not being there or in terms of literacy being a huge issue. How significant or how far away are we really from tapping the rural market?
So I think we are actually quite far. We're actually quite far because connectivity is really a challenge. Along with connectivity, the ability to access, which includes ability to access written language, ability to be able to have a device in hand, those are still challenges. Even though there are statistics which say that there are a large number of smartphones available, there's limitations to smartphones, that's one. And second, still they're not connected. I've been to villages after villages where they're carrying the smartphones and feature phones, and where I've not been able to get connectivity. And when I ask them why you're carrying them, is there connectivity? Should I connect to the right network? Their answer is no. When we go to the city, we get connected, and there's more of a fashion statement. It's possible to have instruments made which will be for India, which will be able to take both satellite data and satellite voice, as well as marry it with GSM and regular networks. Now, those are large investments, large risks, with many policy changes to be brought in, which is something the government should possibly be looking at and stepping in. But clearly, the accessing rural areas is a big challenge. The other part that one should be looking at is the fact that we are not really leveraging existing assets. We're not leveraging the Panchayat Bhavan, we're not leveraging the railway stations, which has got connectivity because the rail-tel network is going through. We're not leveraging the post offices, which are almost ubiquitous and all over the place. We're creating new assets without looking at the existing ones. I think it will be worthwhile to synergize and to leverage the existing assets to roll out the connectivity and enable the rural areas.
Mr. Arvind Gupta, let me get you in this discussion right now. Rural India is a market that is still untapped. Government needs to walk the extra mile. How far away do you think we really are before the entire e-delivery of services actually reaches out to rural Indians?
So I think the panelists before me, I think Jaijit did make some very, very valid points. But there are three things. The government is cognizant of the fact that it needs to be a multimodal hybrid approach. It cannot be only a cellular driven approach. There is a fiber being laid out to a lot of panchayats. The railway network is part of the plan to be leveraged. So let me comment on that. It's a very important part to leverage the railway networks. The post offices are becoming hubs, and both from a payments banks perspective, as well as from a the Wi-Fi hubs and connectivity hubs. And even the CSCs that are in place in many villages are being converted more into village level entrepreneurs to offer a lot more services, payments, and make them more active. So but having said that, Digital India is all about the digital have-nots becoming and they really come from the rural and the Bharat of the villages of India to become connected and become empowered. So that's where the priority is. I think the digital haves, the urban India already is connected, is looking at the next from 3G to 4G, but the real connectivity will happen when people in the rural part of India can get connected and really use the connectivity as a tool for empowerment, for increasing their livelihood, for selling to the markets, and that's the vision of the government. So it's integral to the vision of the government to really empower the rural India, the Bharat in India.
Mr. Serene, how significant is the capacity crunch that we're really talking about at this stage?
It's huge. I think everybody in the room will agree that call drops are happening more and more each day.
I'm sure he has a view on that,
yeah.
but
and I'm not.
we'll not go there.
By no means pointing my finger at you,
of course.
but his hands are tied as well. You know, the government's given him pretty restricted spectrum to work with. On top of that, he's paid a lot of money for the licenses, and then he has to roll out infrastructure. So capacity is a very, very big issue that has to be addressed going forward. I think Wi-Fi will fill the gap for a lot of it. But one of the challenges with rural India is, and one of the discussions we have going on with the government is opening up the ability for private sectors to make money.
Right.
Yeah. People would have rolled out a lot to the villages if they knew they could make money and can get a return. But everybody held back because
there was no sustainable model.
Exactly.
Right.
So one of the big things is we need to come together as private sector with the government to work out fundamentally how both parties can get a long-term sustainable model. And Balaji was in a room with me at the WBA event, and this is the Wireless Broadband Association. If you ask everybody in the room what's the definition of a smart city, they will all come up with a different definition.
Of course.
So one of the things we need to do is just pin things down, work out how people can make money, and then roll out as an ecosystem of partners.
Right.
And I'm sure everybody will contribute, the Facebooks, the Googles of the world, everybody will contribute towards helping this entire infrastructure long-term make money and then deliver on the objective of the government.
Right, Mr. Balaji, I will give you the final comments on capacity crunch, not restricting it only to the tower issue that we're talking about, but on a broader basis, this is a very big issue. At the end of the day, backbone is connectivity, and unless that is addressed, a lot what we're talking about could just end up being on paper. How significant is capacity crunch, and what do you think, how soon do you think that can be addressed?
See, overall, I think I've told you that the industry has invested about $150 billion, has committed another $100+ billion to connect. I think the thing that we've obviously mentioned, it's good to have uniformly applicable policies on tower. The guideline is fantastic from the central government. Implementing it in every state will help. Right of way, having a uniform and affordable right of way is always useful, because we are an industry that's actually reached out to 1 billion people on voice. We've already demonstrated that we can do the same on the data side. It's just about making sure that it's a partnership that's visible at the local level, and that would obviously help a big deal in this particular journey. Capacity from a technology point of view is a non-issue. We have assets that we could leverage to kind of add capacity quick enough, and that's not the problem, but it's just about making sure that whatever small hurdles that might be there at a local government level, etc., can be resolved through dialogue. And then I think because we believed in the opportunity of 1 billion plus people in India from a connectivity point of view and from a data perspective, I don't think that would be a big constraint. So it's about just easing the some of the ground level inefficiencies or bottlenecks that are there.
So there are many challenges that the government will need to overcome, capacity constraint being the biggest challenge that the government will need to overcome. Beyond that, of course, is literacy, another key issue that the government will need to address to ensure e-delivery of services actually takes off the way it has been envisaged by the government. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking out the time to join us on this panel.